We'd like to welcome you to the Donnie Glover Show. We're with Mr. Bob the Shield in the middle of an election season. Mr. Bates said that he had he had an emergency to take care of, and so we're going to be going without him.
Okay.
It's been an interesting election season here, Mr. Bob. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that Donnie, we've got a number of choices to make, but I think as black folk, I think we're at a crossroads on the. And let me go sort of position by position, and let's start with the state's attorney for Baltimore City, since that was the one that since Mr. Bates is running for that position, along with Mr. Thuru Veneraji, as I think. First of all, I think that I think that along with the current state's attorney as well, as I understand it, I think that the person who will prevail in the state's attorney's race will be the one who the voters believe will return that position to what it was supposed to be, what it's supposed to be, and that is simply a prosecutor's position, not a position of leadership in the black community. It was never supposed to be that. And I, as again, I understand why how it happened with Milton Allen many years ago, since that was the first citywide office that anybody. I think that was the first citywide office that anyone black had actually
I
won.
thought it was Judge Joe Howard.
I that was the at that time. I don't think so.
Oh, you said
I think that.
citywide.
Pardon?
You said
Citywide, yeah.
citywide.
And of course, immediately the office of state's attorney became, because of the fact that it was citywide, was perceived as a position of political leadership in our community, and the people who succeeded Milton Allen in that position uh, 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 picked up that mantle and kept it flowing along Pat Jessamy and others. But the problem, of course, is I think that it reached a new height as a result of Freddie Gray. But I think people are ready now. The people are ready now for a prosecutor who's just going to be a prosecutor, who's just going to assist in law enforcement and perform their constitutional duties, and not be focused at all upon the political consequences, and not pursue political objectives, if you will, but simply do their job. And I'm hoping that whoever succeeds in that race would do that. On the attorney general's race between the former governor's spouse and Judge O'Malley and I guess Anthony Brown. I think it's probably going to be close, but again, I think that the attorney, whoever wins that position, will have to hopefully take the AG's office through a cultural change. Right now, I think the AG's office thinks that it is the ultimate protector of the taxpayers of the state of Maryland, and in that way, due to its effective control over other state agencies who must legally rely upon the opinions from the AG's office in the course of performing their administrative responsibilities, the legal responsibilities. The fact of the problem is, of course, the AG's office is not a repository of necessarily of the knowledge and experience that's needed to effectively and properly guide other agencies. Just because you're an assistant AG and just because you've had that position perhaps for several years, down the line, doesn't mean that you are the best person, or doesn't mean that your advice is necessarily that which the agency head ought to follow. For example, there was a recent bill that would have allowed the Maryland Board of Contract Appeals to award attorney's fees to a successful litigant, somebody who filed a bid protest, for example, and won. We say, well, what is that just something to make for lawyers to make money? No, small business can't afford to litigate, period, in any form, whether it's administrative or judicial, because of the cost in many cases of professional services, particularly lawyers. So how do what will convince lawyers to take the risk of pursuing cases on behalf of small business? The prospect of getting paid, because they're like anybody else in business, they want to be paid. So if you take the case and win it and still can't get paid, your client couldn't afford to pay you up front, and now you win it against the state, and the state says we're not going to pay you, then that means for the most part small and particularly black business is not going to get the representation that it needs. So what does the AG say about the bill that would allow for attorneys fees? Well, the Board of Contract Appeals might actually award attorneys fees. Okay, but isn't that what they're supposed to do when the facts and the law would justify it? Well, in the AG's opinion, no. Taxpayers should never have to pay for anything. First of all, they don't recognize that the people bidding for these contracts are also taxpayers. They don't recognize that the people that work for them, for these companies that bid, are taxpayers, mostly Maryland taxpayers. So they have this myopic and narrow view of their responsibility. And that's because they have, in most cases, very little worldly experience. They never really worked for a dollar. They never
You know,
earned a
Mr.
dollar on their own. So anyway,
As,
I'll stop there and let you chime in.
well, we got to unpack some of this. As you were talking about this attorney general and some of the legislation they passed, you made me think of really my first official job at my dad's funeral home. You know what it was?
What was that?
I mean, I'm like 16, 17, I need money. He put me on collections.
Yeah.
Do you know how it is doing collections on somebody who's already buried? They're dead. You don't have a lot of leverage on a family when the loved one is dead. But let's go back to the state's attorney's race. Um, does Vignaraja, the one who was caught in two perverted incidents, does he become our state's attorney because of Fox Media?
Well, let me put the question another way. It, do the voters pay the kind of attention to Fox Media whereby we would expect them to be persuaded by and influenced to the extent that they come out and vote for Veneraji? The fact that Veneraji is supported by Sinclair Broadcasting and David Smith, the owner, is well known. That's certainly not a secret. The question is, will people actually? To what extent do people actually think about who they vote for and why? Is it really a popularity contest? Is it really who talks the best, or is it really, or people going to finally stop and think about what the heck they're doing and why, and the job that the person has to fill, and why you want to support that particular person? I don't know whether that happens in the state's attorney's race. I think it's still too heavily steeped in celebrity status in the community. And frankly, Donnie, we share part of the responsibility in our community because we don't we want individually our own notoriety and ego would push us to a position of doing things that we shouldn't do, or not promoting the people within our community who really have the expertise and the best people to represent us on particular issues. So, and we still have that problem because we so often, when we think we're selecting those from among us, all we're really doing is seconding somebody else's choice. In this case, in the case of Veneraji, it would be the choice made by Sinclair Broadcasting, in my opinion. I can't hear you.
Would you ever run for office again?
No, and I say that because when I ran in 1998, it was for all the wrong reasons. It was because I thought it was so smart. My ego was driven, and sometimes you the right things happen for the wrong reason. Um, I don't running for office. What I'd like to do is help nurture and train and identify other young people who can do that, who have the energy left to do that, and who have the years left to do that. Um, uh, And when I say no, I say that with one caveat, and that is if the day and time comes when I feel that that's a calling that's being put upon me by by my own higher power. But I have no expectation of doing that. But you're on point though. We do have to identify those within our community who we push, and we've got to stop. And we've got to stop, frankly, our allegiance to the established political parties. Uh, as I tell people, the Constitution doesn't mandate a two-party system. That was created by the people who want to maintain the power within two parties because it's easier to do that when you've got a two-party system versus three or four. This is the only form of democracy in the world where the winner takes all. That doesn't require coalition of all significant interest groups in order to govern.
Do you think it's designed to uphold perceived white supremacy?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because no matter what party we claim we're aligned to, we still got to pay an admission. We still got to. We start off by trying to convince, first of all, to identify us, to recognize us, and then to recognize that our interest is important, and then to prioritize our interests. And so we're always starting behind the proverbial eight ball if we pursue it through either of the so-called established parties. So our best option is outside. Is outside the political parties. We don't get as much attention as the so-called independents do. They're not even a party. So
I was going to say we don't get so much attention as the Koreans do, who are lesser in numbers but more strategic when it comes to Annapolis, for instance. It's not that many Koreans compared to black people. Black people make up 30% of the state, but when it came time to setting the liquor store hours,
yeah,
they had a lot to say so.
well, you know that's and the reason is because we are our own worst enemy. As I often say, you don't have to be white to be a white supremacist. A white supremacist is anybody who believes that white people are inherently superior at any level, whether education, intellect, moral, social, whatever. And the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, most black people still believe that. Most black people still believe that white folks' ice is colder. And so that is what keeps white supremacy in business. If 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 we can't recognize, if we keep living as though, as I say, as God was colorblind, or suffer from sleep apnea, then we got a problem. We are different by design, not by accident. And we were not born black or white. Those are constructs that are placed upon us by the culture and the society. God intentionally made us different colors. And so if we try to live a way that's different from the way it was intended, then we're not going to achieve long success or sustain. We're not going to achieve sustainability. Now we've had bits and spurts over the years, uh, but the minute but unfortunately, in most cases, what we've really been taught to strive for, what we've really been taught to strive for, is acceptance. Is acceptance. The minute you say acceptance is your goal, you're acknowledging that somebody else, you've conceded control to somebody else. Because there's got to be an acceptor along with an acceptee. So if you're the one seeking acceptance, that means somebody else has the authority to say yes or no. The minute you surrender that authority, you've lost. You cannot be free.
I was dating a woman and she told me this is a white man's world. Needless to say, the relationship didn't go far after that.
Yeah, and Donnie, unfortunately, we haven't taught our children some fundamental basics about this country. Number one, we became citizens the same way they did when our feet hit the ground. It didn't. We didn't. The 13th Amendment did not make us citizens. We were citizens when our feet hit the ground, and because of that, we were citizens long before many other people even got to these shores. Okay, now, now it's true that the management of the country has been long held by other people, by white folk in particular, because at a time when we were denied the right to participate in the selection process, i.e., vote, they continued to control the management. But don't conflate management with ownership. The fact that they were management, i.e., held the elected position, never meant that they owned the country. And we gotta rethink when we pursued a so-called integration. It was going after the tail of the snake. Yes, that was some discrimination, and it was readily conceded. But the head of the snake was white supremacy. It's just like when people think about abolitionists, they were so great. Abolitionists were against slavery, but they were not for equality. It's two different things. They were against slavery, but they were not for equality. They didn't say black folk are equal to white people. They never said that and didn't believe it.
Whoa, now you bring up something I hadn't thought about. What about the people that run Friends School? What were they though? The Amish?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As I say, yeah, there were a number of groups, so-called abolitionists.
And this type of judgment is coming from people, some of whom were kicked out of Europe because they were criminals, correct?
Yes, yes, yes. And they came to a land. First of all, I always say, how do you discover a place that somebody else is already living in? But yet we call it we discovered. They didn't discover anything. They came and took it because from unsuspecting people who had never been confronted with that kind of adversary before, and who were not expecting, and who were friendly people, who were only wanted to do what we all want to do now, is live in peace and support their families. The concept of greed and avarice for the most part was not part of their culture at the time. But it all changed. It all changed under the guise of so-called colonialism. Well, what does colonialism really mean? That means taking something that don't belong to you. That's what that's what it really means. But we got to teach our children that we became citizens the same way that they did long before it happened, when our feet hit the ground. And now we have an opportunity, if we act more like some other groups, if we coalesce, if we stick together, we have the opportunity to change management, to change. But we got to pick our own people. We can't stop. We can't keep sending people there who were selected by other people and then wait till they get there and try to make them what they should have been before they ever entered the arena. They're not going to change. But trust me, if it walks like a duck, if it's yellow, if it's got a beak and it quacks, it is a duck in reality. It's not a pigeon. It's not an eagle. It's not a bluebird. It is a duck.
Did you hear what you just said, Mr. Bob? That's something that we got to write on the board and hold for future generations. I pretty much heard you say that it's like a boxer going in the ring. If they haven't prepared themselves, if they haven't done the push-ups, the road work, the gym time, the sparring, 3-minute rounds, sparring the best fighters around, if they haven't done their push-ups, they should not be in this race.
You are right. Or put it another way, it's like Mike Tyson said: everybody got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. We gotta pick our own people who can punch back, right? We gotta pick our own people who understand that they're going in a ring where there is a fight, and they gotta punch back. They're not just going in to take the punch.
Then the question becomes, who is the who? Who gets to choose for us? And then maybe before that, who is us? Because you and I think of us in the collective, black people. Well, unfortunately, the schisms and isms of Willie Lynch still divide us today. Now, you got those that are all for the unity, but then again, you got those that get divided on complexion, on age, on sex, sexuality, party, fraternity, sorority, east side, west side. Man, we got more things dividing us up than Baltimore speed cameras.
Well, you're right, yeah, there is the perpetual question of who's on first, right? And we've got, as I often say, we've got a lineup. There's a doorway, and the doorway will be there for all that would enter, but you can only go through one at a time. That means you got to line up behind somebody. You cannot, and that means you got to have enough faith and trust in somebody to be willing to stand behind and not try to push your way through. Because when we try to push our way through the door, it's like the Three Stooges. If they try to go, if you remember the old Three Stooges, they don't go in. Nobody gets through because the doorway is blocked by all three trying to go through at one time. Now, for me, Donnie, the leader is plain. It's Almighty God. Let me, because I believe that He made the ultimate sacrifice. I believe that whether I believe all the things that are or not. I believe that He made the ultimate sacrifice. I believe, and I also believe before He made the sacrifice, He identified who the people, who the new chosen people were going to be. And so I follow his direction as best as I can understand it, and as best as much as I possibly humanly can, with of course his help as well, because we can't even do that on our own. We don't have that kind of power. So, and I'm not to concede that I don't have the power, and the world is better off without my having the power. But that's who I line up behind, and that's who I think we all will have to line up behind if we're going to get through this quagmire. We can't continue to live in a world where everybody has his own king and chooses, and the truth is whatever we think it is. That won't work.
Governor Hogan came and endorsed Vigna Raja for state's attorney. We know that Governor Hogan may have aspirations of running as a Republican for mayor of Baltimore. I personally told him that running for mayor of Baltimore is harder than running for governor. But does that have any influence on Vigna Raja, the candidate?
I don't think so. And the reason is, the governor's popularity in Baltimore City is largely a result of the ineptitude of the city administration at the time. I mean, the governor's popularity in Baltimore City, spiraled upward during the administration of Stephanie Rawlins Blake, and particularly during Freddie Gray, if you remember, when she disappeared for what, almost a week, leaving a void. Well, nature abhors a vacuum. The governor stepped in and filled that vacuum. Uh, when the pandemic, COVID, was another example. The leadership and administration in the city was uncertain, indefinite, and appeared to be somewhat chaotic in terms of its approach. Not just the city, but and also the rest of the state. Well, who stepped in? The governor stepped in and created at least what appeared to be a cohesive approach that people could understand, right or wrong. At least people heard him and they understood it, and so his popularity, not just in Baltimore City, but throughout the state, spiraled upward. I think those times are over. I don't think that popularity will translate into votes for Veneraji.
Um, so this governor's race is now upon us. What's that looking like?
Well, I frankly think it's a two-man race. I think it's coming down to Francho and Westmore. As you know, I'm unapologetically a Westmore supporter. Not because I think he is all that he should be at the moment, but I think he offers the best promise. I think he, for me. Now, so that's where I am, and that's where I'm asking other people who to have a little faith, who trust me to trust him. And that's another way of saying, lining up behind somebody you trust, and hopefully you trust somebody for the right reasons. But you've got to line. I can't know everybody. I can't know everything about everybody. I struggle even sometimes even to know myself. But I got to trust somebody. If Donnie says to me, that's a good guy, and I trust Donnie, then I gotta say that's a good guy. I can't say I gotta talk to him myself. I can't say I gotta sit him down myself. I can't say he's gotta pass my test. No, if I trust Donnie and Donnie says he's a good guy, then I say he's a good guy.
You know, politics is not that simple. This governor's race is getting very ugly, and we're not even into the championship rounds. Can Westmore survive this challenge?
Oh, I think it will. You know, this whole what I call the birther issue of whether he was born or what born in Baltimore City or raised in Baltimore City. You know,
They ain't said nothing in 10 years, and then all of a sudden it comes out.
right, right, right. I hope we're larger than that. I hope we're bigger than that. There are two shows that neither of which lasted very long, and I think they both were Netflix originals. One was The House of Cards, and the other was The Designated Survivor with Kiefer Sutherland and Kevin
I
Spacey.
used to watch Survivor.
Yeah, Designated Survivor and House of Cards. If you want to understand politics in this country, watch those two shows. um, Especially House of Cards, especially House of Cards with Kevin Spacey. I think that the games playing should end, and we've got to search for the truth, and we've got to be willing to understand the truth, and in some cases that means clearing our minds of everything that we think we know, because in most cases we really don't.
For me, I don't care if Westmore was raised in an igloo.
Right.
If he came through America, then it didn't matter whether he was in Washington, Baltimore, or Alaska. Because he's going to deal with racism. This is just America, and he's going to have to deal with it. I don't like them swinging on his military record. Just the fact that you had the courage to put on the uniform and go to Afghanistan. I mean, you got weekend soldiers that haven't been around the corner. So it's always interesting at who's doing the judging, but essentially, I'm thinking it's the black woman who will determine if he gets a pass or not.
Well, again, I don't, I yield to the people who have far more knowledge and experience in the field than I do. I'm not a political strategist, and I don't know the statistics or all of those things. But I would tell you that when West first came to my office, and before the conversation even started, I said there are three things that you need to know before you say another word. Number one, I'm not impressed with your being a Rhodes Scholar, having been awarded a scholarship by some white racist from South Africa by way of Great Britain. So that's not going to impress me. Number two, I'm not impressed by Afghanistan because, as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. And number three, I'm not impressed by your being paid 800 grand a year by Robin Hood, and everybody on the board's a white billionaire. Neither of those things impress me. So now we can talk. Let's take those things off the table, and let's talk. Let's talk as one black man to another. And we went on and had that conversation. And as I said, I don't have. What is Westmore all that we need now? Nobody is. But we need somebody who at least has the intelligence and the willingness to listen and to
Hey
the
man,
ability to learn.
after Donald Trump, the threshold is not that tall. Peter Franchot, some people believe that he will award Darrell Barnes Secretary of Commerce for his support of a Franchot administration. Has there ever been a black Secretary of Commerce? Would a Franchot put a black man in such a, what do you call those positions?
Well, the department head, no, I don't believe there's ever. Well, the Department of Commerce is still relatively new, but no, there's never been a black person, and I will, for the purpose, I'm accepting the notion that skin color now it determines blackness, but we know that that's not necessarily true. But let me say this about here's the real test. Everybody says they want to get rid of the wealth gap, right? We want to reduce the gap and the wealth gap between blacks and whites. Well, it's just like a horse race. How can I catch up if the other guy's running faster than me? You can't, we can't, and what am I saying? You can't reduce the wealth gap unless you slow down the people who are already ahead. So don't talk to me about how we're going to reduce the wealth gap from the ground up. I can't run fast enough. I can't cover enough ground. You have to cut. You have to slow down the folks in front if you really want me to catch up. Now, who? Now the question is, nobody's really proposed that. Now Biden goes to a so-called wealth tax, but it's more than that. It's because what happens is if you put a tax on it there, what's going to happen is just simply going to put it somewhere where they can give more of it to generations yet unborn. No, we have to cut off the pipeline. If it's a bullet, if you're still alive after you get hit, chances are not more that you're going to die from blood loss than from the bullet itself. We have to stop the bleeding. We have to stop the process by which this accumulated wealth most of which ultimately, if you trace it back, came from us and our toil and the thing. Have to stop the process where it is able to be transferred to generations yet unborn, and then allow those to spin a story as though they earned it. And all of a sudden, we work so hard for no, no, not so. I was appalled by the story with Flores. Is begging white folk for a job as a head coach in an industry where 70% of at least 70% of the money is generated by black folk. Something's wrong with that story. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with the story about the Ketanji Jackson Brown with nothing to fear will sit there and allow Lindsey Graham and those I almost said a bad word, and those people to talk to her the way that what's wrong with a black woman being mad? You talking about that angry black? If there's a reason for it, then be mad. Show our children that we don't have to dance when ain't no music. We don't have to sing when ain't no song, and we ain't gotta act like we ain't mad when anybody in the right mind would be angry.
Mr. Bob, what I see a lot of times in those situations, I see cowards.
Yeah.
Their mothers were cowards. Their mothers were cowards. It's like insanity after insanity.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Our children need heroes. Our
I
children
don't see
need.
character. When I see George Washington, it's been given to us. A picture has been painted. The man who never told a lie. He was a damn slave owner. So he was a liar and a thief and a cheat. I mean, the audacity. And so then when a John Brown comes around, like the one I talk about in my book, Captain John Brown, who was not just an abolitionist, until I researched the book, I didn't know what a Kansas Jayhawker was. But the Jayhawkers, when a state went to enter a union, the question was, are you a slave state or a free state? The Jayhawkers were for freedom. They were against slavery, and they were shooting slavers. I like Captain John Brown. I wish he were alive today.
Yeah. Well, the so-called, if you remember, obviously, the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to the border states. It only applied to the states like Kansas. It was not a proclamation that freed states throughout the country as it existed at that time. And as I said earlier, abolitionists, while they were against slavery, were not necessarily for equality. See, the head of the snake is the equality end, not the slave. The anti-slavery is the tail. The lack of discrimination is the tail. The so-called integration is the tail. If we have two schools, one has books and the other doesn't have books, then give the one that doesn't have books. Don't tell it to close and go move to the other school. But that's what happened to us. That's what every time that we get to a point where having some pride in who we are is at issue, we're taught that we shouldn't have it. We can't even be black people anymore. Now we got to be people of color. What the heck is that? No. If there's somebody out there that doesn't want to be black, then call them what they want to be. But you're not going to take away my blackness and call me a person of color just so you can include somebody else in the group with me, which dilutes my identity, which makes me more and more invisible. I'm not going to be invisible. And like the lady, like the actor said, and the hate you give when she was talking, the black girl, when she was talking to her white boyfriend who wanted to understand what it meant to be black, and he said to her, "When I look at you, I don't see black or white. I just see the girl I love." And she said, "If you don't see my blackness, then you don't see me." We're not invisible. We're not black by accident. We are who we are by design and intention. And everybody, and until people recognize that, until we recognize it as a people, until we teach our children that, then we can never be free. Not only be free, that's wrong. We are free. Then we can never achieve and pursue our rightful purpose. We can never pursue the objective and the mission that was assigned to us by Almighty God because we're free already.
Shifting gears a bit, Mr. Bob, what's
Yeah.
wrong with Africa?
With
Will
who?
Africa
Oh,
will Africa ever get it together? Will Africa ever be in a position of kicking out the colonizers and economic rapists that come in there to take everything they have?
well, I don't know because I don't know if if we got first of all we've got to get a legitimate source of information about what's really going on in the various countries of Africa because I don't believe that what's happening in South Africa is not the same as what's going on in Tanzania and Kenya and other places necessarily, but overall the concept that Africa as a continent has somehow shed its overseers, has shed the white control is not true because as you just pointed out, they still control the money. They still, even though they may not be physically in control as much, they still control essentially the resources. There's still tremendous pushback in South Africa about the repatriation of the land. So will Africa will one or more countries in Africa ever really achieve at the point where they can determine their own fate and future without consultation with or control of white folk? I don't really know, but I do know that I would suggest this: that we're no longer talking about a world where we can isolate a particular country. The world's become too small. It's become too small. Now we must think Pan Africanism is too small a concept today. It doesn't fully embrace because the internet and technology have made the world from intellectually no bigger than what the country was 100 years ago. So now we've got to think not just of Pan Africanism. We've got to think of globalization. We every time we make a decision here, we've got to consider what effect it's going to have 7,000 miles away. And we've got to look at what's going on 7,000 miles away and understand that it's going to have an impact on what's happening here, or that is as a result from what's happening here. U.S. foreign policy for years has been monetization of the leadership of the foreign countries. Whoever's willing to take the most money, or whoever we can buy, we can control. That's been the foreign policy. That's why nobody knows what the budget of CIA is. That's why nobody knows how much this country actually spends for foreign policy. But the world is now saying, hey, money is not enough. The many countries in the world are now saying, look, you can no longer buy our integrity. It's no longer for sale because we got to face the same problem you do. Our children. We got to look our children in the eye too. And the world is saying time out on that. And that's fundamentally the problem that Biden has. He's become president in a world that no longer that didn't exist when he entered politics. And I don't think he's surrounded by people who understand that there's been a change and that the change is ongoing, whether he wants it or not.
Baltimore City Police Commissioner, I've yet to hear anyone say, you know what? The police commissioner gotta go. Is it a foregone conclusion that he makes a crap load of money? He should make it. He's doing his best to implement some godforsaken consent decree, and Baltimore is just going to hell in a basket, a handbasket with gasoline drawers on.
Well, I think that we there's a fundamental changes have to be made in the whole concept of policing. Number one, we got to stop lying about what police can and cannot do. Police cannot stop crime, right? If crime is to stop, it's only going to be come at a time when the community trusts and believes in the police and cooperates with the police. Now, Why doesn't the black community trust police? The reasons are as long as my arm. So how do you create that trust? Well, number one, we got trust believes, as Hannibal Lecter said in Silence of the Lamb, you cover the thing that you see most. So we got to make police, we got to have people in the police force who look like the people in the community. We got to make being a policeman an honorable profession again to our children, to our young men and our young women. We've got to make that so that when grandma looks down the street and they see a policeman coming, and her first thought is, "Oh Lord, I hope he ain't coming here to get nobody in my house." To come on in and have a cup of coffee and sit down because I know your mama. I saw you when you were growing up. I used to see you walking to school. I know you. I trust you. That's when you're gonna have a reduction in crime. Now, as far as Harrison is concerned, I saw no reason to bring him from New Orleans in the first place. He should be on the first boat back. He ought to be on the notion generally that in order to have real and effective leadership in our city, we've got to go elsewhere to look for it, is one that we ought to abandon. We don't need Harrison, but we don't need many of the people who've been imported here from outside the city. The people who know the city best are the people who are already here. We're the only ones who ignore that simple and obvious fact, in my opinion.
Mr. Bob, we've touched on a number of things. I can't get you to run for governor. You won't bite on that. So I'm left with these second choices. I do like Marilyn Mosby. Let me just say for the record, I am not going against that lady. I went against her twice, and maybe that's why Ivan or Hassan Giordano advised him not to come on this show, because I have articulated that I do support Marilyn Mosby. I went against her with Russell Neverdon and lost. Went against her with Ivan and lost. She's earned my respect. I'm not fighting that lady no more. So I believe that's probably why Ivan Bates did not show on today's show, because he can talk all he wants, but I'm not going against that lady. Not a third time. She's won.
If in fact, and I really don't like to engage in a whole lot of speculation, but if in fact that is the reason that for him not showing today or withdrawing, then shame on him, because any opportunity to accurately and truthfully communicate with the people ought to be seized upon, and not run from for political reasons. That's a problem with me. I mean, if you ought to be, and as I say, the main problem I think with the office of the state's attorney is that it was celebritized, if you will, by making it one that ostensibly was one of political leadership in our community, and it never should have been. It's a simple job: prosecute. Period. Prosecutors are not supposed to have friends of any color. No, no. It's like having a friendly turnkey. No such thing. No, so they're not supposed to have friends of any color. And Ivan and anybody else seeking an office ought to be willing to say that publicly and
Now,
mean it.
this consent decree, I don't have a lot of faith in the consent decree, because at the end of the day, young people are slinging dope in front. I'm watching young people on the avenue roll weed in front of police while having a conversation with them. I was not raised in that world. This is a new world, Mr. Bob.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've lost one or two generations for lack of leadership, because they don't have heroes. And as I say, nature abhors a vacuum, and they will go. So I don't know whether the consent decree helps or hurts that situation. I've never even read the consent decree for that point. But to the extent that a judicial proclamation, whether in the form of consent decree or not, fails to recognize the most important component of any crime reduction program as being community support and community trust, then it's not worth the paper it's written on. And so as I say, the notion that police stop crime. Then the other thing is the notion that a police officer's life is more important than the life of the people that it's supposed to serve needs to be abandoned, because that creates fear. And you don't get respect from fear. All you get is response to fear. And it's respect that the police department is lacking. It's the respect to the community. You don't get respect simply because you carry a bigger gun or longer nightstick or a taser with more powerful current or even dogs. Those things don't get you. I may fear you, but fear and respect are two different things. Respect comes because you treat me, and I believe that you're going to treat me as a human being. You understand that your job is to serve me, not vice versa. So if that's the case, how can your life be more important than mine? So we've got to abandon that notion. In fact, I think that every police officer ought to be required to take an oath. And the oath is, before I take an innocent life, I'll give my own. That doesn't mean, and that means everybody's not suited to be a police officer, Donnie. And if you can't take that oath and mean it and live up to it, then maybe you ought to find another profession. Because the community will only trust police officers who they believe in what I just said. Because you can't fear and respect the same people. One will have precedent over the other. And we got plenty of fear and very little respect.
Good deal. How can people get in touch with you, Mr. Bob?
410-547-8820. That's my office line. 410-547-8820.
Any predictions for the governor's race?
Yeah, Westmore's going to win the Democratic primary and the general election.
Well, primary's coming up on July the 19th. I can't wait to see it. And Baltimore County, don't forget you got a heck of a race to replace your favorite politician, Senator Dolores Kelly.
Yeah, I've talked to Lawrence Williams, who's running for that office. There's another interesting race with Jeff Fugit now. I think it's for Jeff Fugit, who's
Tony
now
Fugit.
running in the second councilmanic district against Izzy.
Tony Fugit.
Tony Fugit, yeah, Tony Fugit. Tony Fugit. I'm sorry. By the way, somebody have him call me if you would. But I've talked to Lawrence Williams, and I like him, and I like his at least what he states to be his commitment. So yeah, there's interesting races all around, and that's
And Jalisi. Jay Jalisi for Senate in the 10th.
Yes.
So you got Jalisi, you got Ben Brooks.
Yeah.
That's going to be a wicked fight out there.
It's going to be quite a fight,
Do
and
you
it's
think
going to be
black
interesting
people-
because
You think
everybody's
black people
really-
will choose the Indian over the black guy?
I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. I mean, everybody's really positioning themselves to be for the race for county executive when Johnny Ochesky's term limited out. You know, assuming that he wins the next time, and I think he will. But so at the end of that term, he can't run again. So everybody's positioning themselves to be the first. Well, not everybody. Some people are positioning themselves to think to be the first black county executive in Baltimore. Julian Jones.
Oh, that would be Julian.
I do not believe presumptively that is correct. I do not. You know, I think you got to earn your. At least in my world, you got to earn your stripes, and there's still work to be done.
Good deal. Mr. Bob, thank you for joining us this morning. Have a beautiful day. Good morning, world.
Goodbye.